Sunlight streamed across Egyptian cotton sheets, illuminating the flashing date on my phone exactly 3 weeks before my engagement. It was a jarring contrast to the memory of my shattered spine and the taste of my own blood on a cold marble floor. I vividly remembered Liam casually wrapping his arm around Chloe's waist, the two of them laughing and toasting to my stolen inheritance as they watched the life drain from my eyes. I had died consumed by a hatred so violently cold it defied hell itself. They thought they had buried a naive heiress, completely unaware they had just resurrected a monster. The memory of my death wasn't just a nightmare. It was a sensory branding on my soul. Even now, sitting in the center of my plush sunlit bedroom, I could still taste the coppery tang of my own blood. I could still feel the excruciating, paralyzing snap of my spine after being pushed down the sweeping staircase of the Kensington estate. In my previous life, I had been Cora Blake, the only daughter of the late magnate Robert Blake. I was wealthy, sheltered, and agonizingly desperate for love. Liam Kensington, with his tailored suits, boyish charm, and practiced smiles, had swooped in when my father died. He was the perfect fiancé. And Chloe Davies. She was my rock, my best friend since middle school, the girl whose college tuition I paid, whose apartment I furnished. They had been sleeping together for 3 years, right beneath my nose. In that past life, I found out too late. We were already married, the ink dry, on a legally binding document that handed Liam control of the Blake Empire. When I caught them in my own marital bed, Liam didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He just sighed, grabbed my shoulders, and threw me backward. The staircase did the rest. As I lay at the bottom, paralyzed and bleeding internally, Chloe had stepped over my broken body, her Louboutins clicking against the marble. "Don't look so tragic." "Cora," she had whispered, adjusting the diamond tennis bracelet I had gifted her. "You always were too soft for this world. We'll take good care of your money." I gasped, my eyes snapping open to the present. My hands flew to my neck, my back. No blood, no shattered bones. I scrambled out of bed and rushed to the vanity mirror. Staring back at me was a 24-year-old Cora. My face was flushed, my eyes wide with terror. But I was whole, alive. My shaking hands grabbed my phone from the nightstand. June 4th. My breath caught in my throat. June 4th. The grand engagement party, the event that would lock me into the Kensington family's suffocating grip, was scheduled for June 25th. I had been sent back. Fate God, or perhaps just sheer unadulterated vengeance, had rewound the clock. A knock sounded at my bedroom door, soft and familiar. "Cora, sweetie, are you awake?" It was Chloe. My stomach violently heaved. Every instinct screamed at me to grab the heavy brass lamp from my desk and smash it into her deceitful face. I closed my eyes, forcing my breathing to steady. "Breathe, Cora. If you kill her now, you go to jail. If you play the game, you destroy them completely. Come in." I called out, my voice miraculously steady. The door creaked open, and Chloe padded in, holding 2 steaming mugs of matcha latte. She looked the picture of innocence in her oversized pink sweater and messy bun. "Morning, bride-to-be," she beamed, handing me a mug. "Liam just texted me. He's tied up at the firm this morning, but said to tell you he loves you and can't wait for the cake tasting later." I took the mug, letting the warmth seep into my freezing hands. I looked at her, truly looked at her. I noticed the faint red mark on the side of her neck, clumsily covered with concealer. A hickey from my fiancé. In my past life, I would have thought she burned herself with a curling iron. Now the truth was blinding. "Thank you, Chloe." I smiled, the expression not reaching my eyes. "What would I do without you? You'd be a total mess." She laughed, sitting at the foot of my bed. "By the way, I was thinking about the seating chart for the 25th. We need to make sure Liam's parents are front and center, right next to the podium." "Of course," I replied, taking a slow sip of the matcha. "We wouldn't want them to miss a single second of the speeches. I have a feeling the engagement night is going to be unforgettable." As she chattered on about floral arrangements and centerpieces, my mind was already 1,000 steps ahead. They wanted my fortune. They wanted to humiliate me, use me, and eventually discard me like trash. But the board was reset, and this time I knew all their plays. I wasn't just going to break off the engagement. I was going to tear down Liam's pristine reputations, obliterate Chloe's social standing, and make them bleed in front of the entire high society of the city. The countdown had begun. 21 days until I blew their world apart. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in psychological torture, mostly for myself. Acting like a love-struck idiot while knowing the man kissing your forehead is plotting your demise requires a sociopathic level of control. I spent my days nodding enthusiastically at wedding planners, agreeing with Liam's pompous father, Richard Kensington, about the merger of our family trusts and playing the oblivious best friend to Chloe. But the nights were mine. My first move was securing a private investigator. I didn't go to the upscale firms Liam's family used. I went to the gritty side of town and found Tristan Brooks, an ex-cop with a bad attitude, a sharp mind, and zero ties to the upper crust. I need eyes on my fiancé, Liam Kensington, and my maid of honor, Chloe Davies. I told Tristan, sliding a thick envelope of cash across his scratched metal desk. I want photos, videos, audio. I want to know when they breathe, when they sleep, and especially when they sleep together. Tristan raised an eyebrow, thumbing through the $100 bills. "Kensington, huh, big fish? You sure you want to go digging Ms. Blake?" "Sometimes people don't like what they find." "I already know what I'll find, Mr. Brooks," I said coldly. "I just need the proof. High-definition proof." Within 3 days, Tristan delivered. It turned out Liam and Chloe weren't just careless. They were arrogant. They believed I was so blindly in love that they barely hid it. Tristan handed me a sleek black folder filled with glossy photographs. Liam and Chloe making out in his Maserati in an underground parking garage. Chloe entering Liam's bachelor pad at 11 p.m. and leaving at 7 a.m. And the audio? Tristan had managed to clone Liam's phone using a contact in the telecom industry. I sat in my locked home office listening to the recorded calls on a burner laptop. "God, she's so annoying." Liam's voice drifted through the speakers, dripping with contempt. "She spent 3 hours talking about peonies today, Chloe. Peonies. I swear if her trust fund wasn't unlocking on the wedding day, I would have lost my mind by now." "Just hold on a little longer, baby," Chloe purred back. "Once you have the Blake shares, we can slowly phase her out. Keep playing the Prince Charming. You're so good at it." "I'm coming over tonight. Leave the back door unlocked." I slammed the laptop shut, my hands trembling with rage. It was one thing to remember their betrayal. It was another to hear it happening in real time. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burn his house down. Instead, I carefully backed up the audio files and locked the laptop in a safe. But infidelity wasn't enough to destroy Liam Kensington. His family was rich enough to spin a cheating scandal into a minor indiscretion. I needed to ruin him legally and financially. Using my authority as the head of the Blake estate, I hired a forensic accountant under the guise of an audit for the prenuptial agreement. I directed her specifically to the joint venture accounts Liam had convinced me to open a year ago. By day 10, the accountant found exactly what I was looking for. Liam had been slowly siphoning funds, nearly $2 million from our joint accounts, into a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. He was stealing my money to fund a failing tech startup he had invested in behind his father's back. If Richard Kensington knew his son was a thief and a terrible investor, Liam would be cut off instantly. With 7 days left until the engagement, I began the final phase of my setup. I invited Chloe over for a girls' night in. We drank expensive wine, did face masks, and laughed. "I'm just so happy for you, Cora," Chloe said, her eyes gleaming with fake tears as we sat on my velvet sofa. "You deserve this. Liam is amazing." "I know," I smiled, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "But you know I've been feeling a little overwhelmed with all the planning. I decided to make a special slideshow for the engagement party, a tribute to our relationship and to you, my best friend. I've hired a private AV team for the venue to handle it. I want it to be a complete surprise." "Aw, Cora." "That's so sweet," she cooed, completely oblivious to the trap snapping shut around her leg. "Liam is going to cry." "Oh," I whispered, staring dead into her eyes. "I guarantee he's going to cry." I spent the next 48 hours editing the ultimate masterpiece. I mixed photos of me and Liam smiling with audio clips of him calling me pathetic. I took beautiful romantic music and layered it over high-resolution video of Liam pressing Chloe against the wall of a parking garage. I compiled the financial documents showing his embezzlement, highlighting the stolen numbers in bright, undeniable red. I loaded everything onto a single encrypted USB drive. It felt heavy in my palm like a loaded gun. 3 days before the event, Liam took me out to an expensive dinner. He held my hand across the table, his thumb stroking my knuckles. "You've been so quiet lately, Cora. Are you getting cold feet?" He teased his charming smile, perfectly practiced. "Not at all, Liam," I replied, tracing the rim of my wine glass. "I've just been reflecting on how much my life is going to change. I just want everything to be perfect." "It will be," he promised, kissing my hand. "We're going to rule this city together." I smiled back, a genuine, terrifying smile that he mistook for adoration. "No, Liam," I thought. "I am going to rule. You are going to be a cautionary tale." June 25th arrived with mocking perfection. The sky was a brilliant cloudless blue, and the air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine. The engagement party was being held in the grand ballroom of the plaza, a venue that screamed old money and undeniable power. Hundreds of the city's elite politicians, CEOs, socialites, and media moguls were arriving in a parade of black tie elegance. In the bridal suite, I stood motionless as a team of stylists fussed over my dress. It was a custom-made emerald green silk gown. I had refused to wear white. White was for victims. Green was the color of envy, of poison, of money. Chloe stood behind me, looking breathtaking in a deep sapphire dress. She stepped forward, dismissing the stylist with a wave of her hand, and began to fasten a diamond clasp at the nape of my neck. "You look like a queen, Cora," she whispered, her eyes meeting mine in the vanity mirror. I noticed the subtle sparkle at her throat. It was a delicate platinum chain with a teardrop sapphire. I recognized it instantly. It was a vintage piece Liam had supposedly bought at an auction last week. He told me he lost the bidding war. Clearly, he had won it for his mistress. "That's a beautiful necklace, Chloe," I said smoothly. "Is it new?" Her hand flinched slightly against my neck, but she quickly recovered her smile, bright and empty. "Oh, an early birthday gift from my aunt. It's just glass, really." "It suits you," I replied, standing up and smoothing my skirt. "Are we ready?" "Born ready," she smiled. We descended the grand staircase of the hotel, and as I entered the ballroom, a hush fell over the crowd. The string quartet shifted into a beautiful classical piece. The room was dripping in crystal chandeliers, towering floral arrangements of white roses, and an open bar pouring vintage Dom Perignon. At the end of the room stood Liam. He looked devastatingly handsome in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo. His father, Richard Kensington, stood beside him looking smug and victorious. To them, I wasn't a bride. I was an acquisition. Liam stepped forward, taking my hand and leading me to the center of the room. Flashbulbs went off as the society photographers captured the perfect couple. We mingled, we laughed, we accepted congratulations from people who only cared about the size of our combined bank accounts. Through the crowd, I caught the eye of my hired AV technician, a trusted associate of Tristan Brooks. He was stationed at the control booth overlooking the ballroom. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. The USB was loaded. The system was bypassed. No one could stop the feed once it started. At 9 p.m., a sharp clinking of a glass echoed through the room. Liam had taken the microphone at the front podium. The crowd quieted, turning their attention to the golden boy. "Ladies and gentlemen, family friends," Liam began, his voice echoing perfectly through the state-of-the-art sound system. He looked at me, his eyes practically swimming in fake adoration. "We are gathered here tonight to celebrate more than just an engagement. We are celebrating the merging of two hearts, two families, and a love that I frankly believe is written in the stars." A collective, sickeningly sweet awe rippled through the older guests. Chloe stood near the front, dabbing a fake tear from her eye. "Cora," Liam continued, his voice dropping an octave to sound more intimate. "Since the day I met you, you have been my light. You are kind, you are generous, and you are the only woman I will ever want to stand by my side. I promise to protect you, to cherish you, and to be entirely devoted to you for the rest of our lives." He extended his hand toward me. The crowd erupted into applause. I took a deep breath, smoothing the front of my emerald gown, and walked up the steps to the podium. The applause died down as I took the microphone from his hand. I looked out at the sea of faces, the billionaires, the gossips, the predators, and the prey. "Thank you, Liam," I said, my voice ringing out clear and unnervingly calm. "That was a beautiful performance." Liam's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A murmur rippled through the front row. "I've spent the last few weeks thinking about what this union truly means." I continued pacing slowly across the stage, never breaking eye contact with the crowd. Marriage is built on honesty. It is built on trust. And as Liam so beautifully put it, absolute devotion. I paused, looking directly at Chloe, whose smile was beginning to look strained. Then I looked at Richard Kensington, who was frowning, sensing a deviation from the script. I wanted to give Liam something special tonight. I announced, raising my voice to carry over the growing tension in the room. A tribute, a reflection of the true nature of our relationship. Because I believe everyone here deserves to see the real Liam Kensington, and the woman who has been standing by his side. Liam chuckled nervously, stepping toward me. Cora, sweetheart, what is this? Look at the screens, darling, I whispered, stepping away from him. I raised my left hand and snapped my fingers. The lights in the ballroom instantly dimmed to a dramatic low. The massive 10 by 20-foot LED screens positioned around the ballroom, originally meant to display our monogram, flickered violently to life. The string quartet was drowned out by the sudden booming audio playing through the speakers. It was Liam's voice, crisp and arrogant. God, she's so annoying. I swear if her trust fund wasn't unlocking on the wedding day, I would have lost my mind by now. The ballroom plunged into a dead, horrifying silence. A woman in the front row gasped so loudly it sounded like a gunshot. On the massive screens, a high-definition video began to play. It was Liam and Chloe. He had her pinned against the hood of his Maserati, his hands tangled in her hair, kissing her with a desperate animalistic hunger. Just hold on a little longer, baby. Chloe's voice echoed through the room, her face blown up 20 feet high, for every socialite in the city to see. Once you have the Blake shares, we can slowly phase her out. The transition on the screen was flawless. It cut to a montage of photos, Chloe sneaking out of his apartment at dawn, Liam slapping her rear end in a secluded restaurant booth, time-stamped dates flashing in bold red text, proving this had been going on for years. Cora! Liam yelled, his face draining of all color, looking like a corpse. He lunged for the microphone, but I stepped back, holding it out of his reach. Turn this off. Turn it off now, he screamed at the AV booth, but the technician ignored him. The video shifted again. This time it wasn't infidelity. It was a massive spreadsheet. Bank statements, offshore routing numbers. While we are celebrating devotion, my voice boomed through the microphone, slicing through the rising chaos of the crowd. Let's celebrate financial devotion. Over the past 12 months, my beloved fiancé has embezzled exactly $2.4 million from the Blake Kensington joint venture to fund a failing shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. Richard Kensington let out a sound like a wounded bull. He stumbled forward, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple as he stared at the financial documents on the screen, recognizing his son's signature and the illicit transfers. Liam, what is this? Richard roared over the noise. Dad, it's fake. It's a deep fake. It's all lies. Liam panicked, sweating profusely, grabbing his hair. Is the necklace a lie, too? Chloe, I asked, pointing directly at her. The spotlight operator, another one of Tristan's guys, swung a massive, blinding white beam directly onto Chloe. She shrieked, throwing her hands over her face, the sapphire necklace gleaming under the harsh light. A vintage piece from Sotheby's, wasn't it, Liam? I mocked, my voice dripping with venom. Bought with my father's money to adorn the neck of my best friend. The ballroom was an absolute pandemonium. Reporters who had been invited to cover the society wedding of the year were frantically recording the screens, live streaming the destruction to the world. Liam's mother had fainted into a waiter's arms. You crazy bitch! Liam suddenly lunged at me, dropping the charming facade completely, his face twisted in pure, violent rage. But I was ready. I sidestepped him with the grace of a matador and two massive security guards hired privately by me. Bypassing the hotel's staff, stepped out from behind the curtain, grabbing Liam by the arms and slamming him face first onto the polished wooden stage. Get your hands off me! Liam thrashed, his custom suit tearing at the shoulder, I walked slowly over to where he was pinned. I crouched down, bringing my face inches from his. The cameras flashed endlessly, capturing every second. "The engagement is off, Liam." I whispered loud enough for the microphone to catch, but soft enough that he knew it was just for him. "And so is your life." I stood up, turning my back on his writhing form. I looked out at the shocked, gaping crowd, locked eyes with Chloe, who was sobbing uncontrollably as people backed away from her, like she had the plague, and I smiled. This was just the beginning. The flash bulbs were still burning after images into my retinas as my private security team escorted me out of the plaza through a subterranean service exit. I climbed into the back of my waiting Maybach, the heavy armored door sealing out the muffled roar of the paparazzi that had already swarmed the streets. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water from the minibar, my hands remarkably steady. For the first time since waking up in my second life, I took a deep, unfiltered breath. The paralyzing weight of my past life, the phantom pain of my shattered spine, the suffocating betrayal felt instantly lighter. I had dropped the guillotine. But the execution was far from over. My phone buzzed relentlessly. It was a symphony of panic. Texts from board members, frantic voicemails from Liam's mother, and a barrage of Google News alerts. Kensington heir caught in embezzlement and adultery scandal at own engagement. Read a push notification from the Financial Times. High society bloodbath. Cora Blake obliterates fiancé, blared page 6. I ignored them all and dialed Tristan Brooks. "Tell me you got it," I said the moment he answered. "Every angle, Ms. Blake." Tristan's gruff voice crackled through the speaker, accompanied by the sound of sirens in the background. "The white-collar division of the NYPD just rolled up to the ballroom. Your accountant friend handed the forensic files directly to the lead detective. Liam Kensington is currently being read his Miranda rights in the hotel kitchen. They're hauling him out in cuffs." A cold, sharp smile touched my lips. "What about Chloe?" "Fled the scene," Tristan replied. "Took a cab heading downtown. I have a tail on her, but honestly, she's the least of your worries right now." Richard Kensington was on the phone with his crisis PR team before Liam even hit the floor. He's going to spin this. He's going to say Liam acted alone and try to protect the Kensington global stock. "Let him try," I murmured. "Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. I want you at the Blake Corporation headquarters. Bring the extended dossiers." The next morning, the Manhattan skyline was painted in a bruised purple dawn. I didn't sleep. Instead, I stood in my penthouse office dressed in a sharp-tailored charcoal Armani suit, my hair pulled back into an unforgivingly sleek bun. The emerald gown was in the trash. The bride was dead. The CEO was clocking in. At 7:45 a.m., I walked into the glass-walled executive boardroom of Blake Industries. The room was already packed. The 12 members of the board of directors were muttering in hushed, panicked tones. At the far end of the long mahogany table sat Richard Kensington. He wasn't technically on the Blake board, but as the architect of the impending corporate merger between our families, he had assumed a seat of power. His face was a mask of restrained fury, the veins in his temples throbbing. "Cora!" Richard barked as I set my leather briefcase on the table. "What the hell was that stunt last night? Do you have any idea the damage you've done to both of our companies' stock prices? It's a bloodbath at the opening bell." I didn't answer him immediately. I slowly unpacked my briefcase, placing a stack of thick black folders in front of my chair. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every board member my father had trusted. "Good morning, gentlemen," I said, my voice echoing off the glass walls. "As you are all aware, the engagement is terminated. Consequently, the proposed merger with Kensington Global is dead in the water. You can't just unilaterally pull out." Richard slammed his fist on the table, standing up. "We have signed letters of intent. We have preliminary contracts. If you breach those, I'll tie you up in litigation for the next decade. Liam's indiscretions are a private matter. They do not dictate corporate strategy." "Sit down, Richard," I commanded, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet timbre. "You are a guest in my building, and right now you are a liability." I gestured to my lead corporate counsel, David Sterling, a silver-haired shark from the prestigious firm of Harrington and Wright. David stood up, distributing copies of the folders I had brought. "If you turn to page 4 of the documents provided," David began adjusting his glasses, "you will see the exact forensic trail of the $2.4 million embezzled by Liam Kensington. However, what Cora did not reveal last night is where the rest of the money came from. Liam didn't just steal from the joint venture. He'd leveraged Blake corporate assets to secure lines of credit for his offshore shell company." The room erupted into outrage. Board members began shouting, flipping furiously through the pages. "Furthermore," I interjected, slicing through the noise, "he used a subsidiary of Kensington Global to launder the collateral." "Richard, did you really think I didn't track the routing numbers back to your logistics firm?" Richard's face drained of color, his aggressive posture collapsing. That's impossible. I had no knowledge of—" "Save it for the SEC, Richard," I sneered, "because I forwarded this entire dossier to them an hour ago. Under the morality and fiduciary breach clauses of our preliminary contracts, the Blake estate is not only legally permitted to sever all ties without penalty, but we are also seizing the Kensington collateral held in escrow. You owe me $50 million in breach of contract penalties, and I am collecting today." "You're a monster," Richard whispered, his hands trembling as he stared at the financial ruin laid out before him. "No, Richard," I said, leaning over the table, planting my hands flat against the mahogany. "I'm a Blake. Get out of my boardroom before I have security drag you out by your $5,000 lapels." Richard looked around the room for an ally, but the board members, sensing the shift in power and terrified of the SEC investigation, averted their eyes. Defeated, the patriarch of the Kensington Empire picked up his briefcase and walked out, his legacy crumbling with every step. I took my seat at the head of the table. "Now," I said, looking at the remaining men, "let's get to work." By the end of the week, Liam was out on a grueling $5 million bail, confined to his father's estate with an ankle monitor. The media had officially dubbed him the Kensington Con Man, and the social fallout was absolute. Kensington Global stock plummeted by 30%, prompting a hostile takeover bid from a rival conglomerate. But my focus shifted to the rat that had tried to scurry off the sinking ship, Chloe. She had gone completely silent since the party. Her Instagram, once a curated feed of luxury vacations and designer handbags paid for by me, was deactivated. But Tristan Brooks always knew where the rats hid. On Friday afternoon, I stood in the lobby of a stunning floor-to-ceiling glass apartment building in Tribeca. It was the penthouse I had bought for Chloe as a graduation gift when we finished university. Technically, the deed was in the name of a Blake real estate holding company. I had just let her live there rent-free for 3 years. I keyed into the private elevator and rode it to the top floor. I didn't knock. I used my master key and pushed the heavy oak door open. The apartment was a disaster. Designer clothes were strewn across the white leather sofas, half-packed suitcases littered the floor, and empty bottles of Whispering Angel rosé cluttered the marble kitchen island. Chloe was sitting on the floor, frantically shoving shoes into a duffel bag. She looked terrible. Her flawless blowout was a greasy mess, dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes, and she was wearing a stained cashmere sweater. She froze when she heard the door click shut. Her eyes darted up, locking onto me. Pure panic flashed across her face, followed instantly by a pathetic practiced mask of victimhood. "Cora!" She scrambled to her feet, tears instantly welling in her eyes. "Cora, please, you have to listen to me. He manipulated me, Liam. He threatened me. He said if I didn't go along with it, he would ruin me." I was terrified. I walked slowly into the living room, my heels clicking methodically against the hardwood floor. I didn't say a word. I just watched her perform. In my past life, those tears would have broken my heart. Now they just bored me. "We're sisters, Cora," she sobbed, taking a step toward me, reaching out a trembling hand. "You know I would never hurt you intentionally. Please, you have to call off the lawyers. The media is destroying my life. I can't even go outside." I stopped just out of her reach. "Are you finished?" I asked, my voice devoid of any emotion. Chloe blinked her tears, pausing as she registered the absolute ice in my tone. "Cora, I didn't come here to listen to your community theater audition." "Chloe," I said, pulling a folded legal document from my Celine tote bag. I tossed it onto the kitchen island. It landed with a soft final thud. "I came to serve you." She stared at the paper like it was a venomous snake. "What is that?" A 30-day eviction notice would be the standard legal protocol. I explained, walking over to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looking out at the city I was slowly conquering. "But since you are not on the lease, and you have no legal right to this property, my lawyers found a wonderful loophole regarding squatters and trespassing. You have exactly 1 hour to vacate these premises. 1 hour." Chloe shrieked, the victim facade dropping instantly, replaced by sheer panic. "Cora, you can't do this. I have nowhere to go. My bank accounts are frozen." "That's because I sued you in civil court this morning for the misappropriation of funds," I replied calmly. "Every dinner, every vacation, every designer bag you charged to the platinum card I gave you. Since you used those funds to facilitate an affair with my fiancée and assist in corporate espionage, my lawyers successfully argued that those were not gifts, but funds obtained under fraudulent pretenses. The judge agreed to an emergency asset freeze." "You're taking everything," she whispered, her face pale, finally understanding the depth of her ruin. "I'm taking back what is mine." I corrected her, turning to face her. "You thought I was soft, Chloe. You thought I was a naive little girl playing dress-up with my daddy's money. You thought you could step over my body and take my life." The words slipped out before I could stop them, a direct reference to the death she didn't know she had caused. Chloe frowned, confused by the intensity of my statement. I never wanted you dead," she stammered. "Not in this timeline anyway, I thought." 55 minutes, Chloe," I said, checking my Patek Philippe watch. "The building security is waiting in the lobby. If you aren't out by 4 p.m., they will escort you out, without your bags." I turned and walked back toward the elevator. "You're a psychotic bitch," she screamed after me, throwing a crystal glass at the wall. It shattered into 100 pieces, raining down on her half-packed bags. Liam is going to destroy you. He has things on you, Cora. He's not going down alone. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the lobby button. As the doors slid shut, cutting off her hysterical screaming, a cold knot formed in my stomach. He has things on you. Liam was a snake cornered and bleeding, and cornered snakes always strike at the heart. The following Tuesday, the storm broke. I was in my office reviewing the hostile takeover bid that Sterling Global had launched against Kensington Global. Nathaniel Nate Sterling, the ruthless 30-something CEO of the firm, had reached out to me personally. He offered a lucrative partnership with Blake Industries if I backed his takeover bid. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement. He got a media empire, and I got to watch Liam's inheritance be swallowed whole by a corporate predator. But as I was signing the preliminary NDA, Tristan Brooks bypassed my secretary and walked directly into my office. He didn't look like his usual gruff, unshakable self. He looked pale. He locked the heavy glass door behind him and closed the blinds. "What's wrong?" I asked, putting my pen down, my heart rate accelerating. Tristan dropped a heavy battered leather journal onto my desk along with a thumb drive. "Chloe Davies contacted me this morning. She's desperate. She's living in a cheap motel in Queens and realized Liam's legal team is planning to pin the entire embezzlement scheme on her, claiming she manipulated him." "Classic Liam," I muttered. "So she wants to make a deal." "She wants immunity," Tristan said, taking a seat and rubbing his face. "She offered a trade. She said Liam kept a burn book, a physical ledger, and a digital backup of all of his father's dirty dealings. Liam used it as an insurance policy against Richard in case his father ever tried to cut him off." I stared at the leather journal. "And she stole it. She swiped it from Liam's hidden safe the night you broke the engagement right before she fled," Tristan confirmed. "She handed it over to me an hour ago in exchange for a one-way ticket to Europe and $100,000 in cash." "Did you pay her?" "From the discretionary fund, yes," Tristan said. But he wasn't looking at the ledger. He was looking at me with a profound sense of pity and emotion I had never seen on the ex-cop's face. "Cora, I started reading it to verify the intel. It's bad. It's worse than bribes or offshore accounts." A creeping chill spread through my veins. "Show me." Tristan reached over and opened the ledger to a bookmarked page near the middle. The entries were dated 4 years ago. My father's handwriting was nowhere to be found. It was all Liam's meticulous, arrogant scrawl documenting his father's actions. I traced the lines with my finger. Date October 12th. Target Robert Blake. Objective accelerate inheritance timeline for merger acquisition. Method: alteration of prescribed beta blockers. Bribe Dr. Eris Thorne, $500,000 to offshore account. Heart failure inevitable within 48 hours. The air rushed out of my lungs. The room began to spin. My father hadn't died of a random tragic heart attack. He hadn't just overworked himself into an early grave. He was murdered. Richard Kensington had ordered the hit to remove my father from the board, knowing that a grieving, vulnerable Cora would run straight into Liam's waiting, comforting arms. They had orchestrated my entire life. They killed my father to get to me, to get to my empire. In my past life, I had died never knowing this. I had died thinking my father's death was a tragedy, not an assassination. "Ms. Blake." Tristan's voice sounded muffled, like I was underwater. Cora breathed. I gripped the edge of the mahogany desk so hard my knuckles turned white. The hatred I felt on the day I woke up in my second life was a spark compared to the raging apocalyptic inferno that ignited in my chest at that moment. They didn't just break my heart. They didn't just steal my money. They slaughtered my family. "Tristan!" I whispered, my voice trembling with a terrifying violent clarity. "Yes, boss. Cancel the SEC meetings. Cancel the civil suits," I commanded, standing up, my vision narrowing to a pinpoint of pure, unadulterated vengeance. "Cancel them, Cor. We have them on the ropes." "I don't want them on the ropes, Tristan," I said, picking up the ledger and clutching it to my chest. "I want them in a cage, and if the justice system won't put them there, I will bury them underneath the prison myself. Call Nate Sterling. Tell him I'm signing the takeover deal today, but I want a new clause." Tristan swallowed hard, pulling out his phone. "What clause?" "I want absolute total control of the Kensington private security apparatus once the takeover is complete." I said, a dark, dangerous smile spreading across my face. Richard and Liam like to play God with people's lives. Let's see how they handle the devil. Revenge requires a cold heart, but dismantling an empire demands absolute suffocating precision. 48 hours after Tristan dropped the ledger on my desk, I stood in the penthouse office of Sterling Global, overlooking the steel and glass canyons of Wall Street. Nathaniel Sterling, the 34-year-old billionaire CEO, sat across from me. He was a predator in a bespoke Navy suit, a man whose entire fortune was built on identifying weak, bloated companies and consuming them whole. Right now, Kensington Global was bleeding in the water, and Nate was circling. "I've reviewed the revised terms, Cora." Nate said, his sharp blue eyes scanning the contract my lawyers had drafted. "You're offering to inject $400 million from the Blake Private Reserve to fund this hostile takeover. In exchange, you want a 30% equity stake, absolute board control over their logistics division, and total unmitigated ownership of Kensington Aegis, their private security and intelligence firm." He put the contract down and leaned back, steepling his fingers. "The equity, I understand. The logistics division makes sense for your supply chains. But Kensington Aegis, it operates at a net loss. It's basically Richard Kensington's personal army of fixers and ex-mercenaries. Why do you want a private security firm?" "Because," I replied, taking a slow sip of the scotch he had poured me, "I don't just want to take Richard's money. I want to take his sword, and then I want to use it to cut him to pieces." Nate studied my face for a long moment. Whatever he saw in my eyes made him smile a dangerous, predatory grin. "I like you, Cora Blake. You don't just play to win, you play to ruin. The deal is signed. The tender offer goes public at the opening bell tomorrow. By Friday, Richard Kensington won't own the chair he sits on." The ensuing days were a blur of corporate violence. With the Blake fortune backing Sterling Global, the hostile takeover was a blitzkrieg. Kensington Global's shareholders, already panicked by Liam's massive embezzlement scandal and the looming SEC investigation I had triggered, abandoned Richard in droves. They sold their shares to us at a premium, desperate to escape the sinking ship. By Thursday afternoon, Richard called an emergency meeting of his board of directors, desperately trying to institute a poison pill defense to stop the takeover. He didn't know I already held the keys to his fortress. I arrived at the Kensington Global headquarters unannounced, flanked by Nate Sterling, Tristan Brooks, and 4 massive men in dark suits, my newly acquired Kensington Aegis security detail. The irony of using Richard's own private guards to storm his castle was a sweet, intoxicating nectar. We bypassed the receptionist and walked directly into the executive boardroom on the 50th floor. Richard was standing at the head of the table, his face a haggard map of stress and sleepless nights, mid-sentence, in a desperate plea to his board. He froze as I walked in. "What is the meaning of this?" Richard demanded, his voice cracking slightly. "Security, remove these people immediately." The 4 Aegis guards didn't flinch. They stood firmly behind me, hands clasped, staring blankly ahead. "They don't work for you anymore, Richard," I said smoothly, pulling out a chair at the opposite end of the long glass table and sitting down. "As of 1 p.m. today, Sterling Global and Blake Industries hold a 51% controlling interest in Kensington Global. I own this building. I own your subsidiary companies. And I own your security firm. You are standing in my boardroom." The Kensington board members began murmuring in panicked, hushed tones, realizing the war was already over. "You can't do this," Richard yelled, slamming his hands on the table. "I built this company. I am the founder. You think you can just waltz in here and strip me of my life's work because my idiot son slept with your friend?" "No, Richard," I replied, the temperature in the room dropping 10 degrees. "I think I can strip you of your life's work because you are a massive corporate liability." I looked at Tristan, who silently distributed copies of a heavily redacted file to the board members. "Gentlemen," I addressed the room, "what you are holding is a preliminary summary of a federal investigation currently being launched by the Department of Justice. It details years of offshore bribery, corporate espionage, and illegal market manipulation authorized by Richard Kensington. If you allow him to remain on this board in any capacity, the DOJ will freeze your personal assets as co-conspirators." The board members turned pale, furiously scanning the documents. The panic in the room was palpable. They were wealthy men who valued their freedom and their bank accounts above all loyalty. "I motion for the immediate termination of Richard Kensington as CEO and chairman of the board," stammered a senior board member, raising a shaking hand. "Seconded," another instantly chimed in. Richard looked around the room, absolute betrayal flashing in his eyes as his lifelong friends and colleagues threw him to the wolves to save themselves. "You cowards!" he spat. He looked at me, a deep, venomous hatred twisting his features. "You haven't won Cora. You think you're untouchable. You're just a little girl playing a dangerous game. And you're an unemployed old man trespassing in my office." I countered, my voice laced with steel. I snapped my fingers. "Aegis, escort Mr. Kensington off the premises. Revoke his building access and confiscate his corporate devices." His own private security guard stepped forward, grabbing him roughly by the arms. Richard thrashed, shouting obscenities as they dragged him out of the boardroom, the heavy wooden doors slamming shut behind him. Nate Sterling leaned down, whispering in my ear, "Brutal, flawless execution. The company is ours." "This was just the appetizer, Nate," I murmured, my eyes fixed on the closed doors. "Now we hunt." Stripping Richard of his wealth and power was necessary to isolate him, but it wasn't justice. Justice was holding him accountable for the murder of Robert Blake. And for that, I needed the weapon he had used. Tristan Brooks had been tracking Dr. Eris Chandler relentlessly. The physician had quietly resigned from his prestigious role at the city's top cardiology hospital 2 years ago, right after my father's death. According to Liam's burn book, Chandler had received a $500,000 wire transfer to an offshore account in Cyprus in exchange for altering my father's beta blocker prescription, inducing the fatal heart attack. Dr. Chandler had used the blood money to buy an isolated, ultra-modern glass house on the cliffs of Montauk. He thought he was safe, living out his early retirement out of the public eye. He was wrong. Friday evening, as a brutal coastal storm began whipping rain against the cliffs, a fleet of black SUVs rolled up the long, winding driveway of Chandler's estate. I sat in the back of the lead vehicle, watching the windshield wipers violently slice back and forth. Tristan sat beside me, loading a fresh magazine into his Glock. "We do this quietly, boss. He's flighty. If he thinks he's cornered by the cops, he might do something stupid. But if he thinks he's cornered by you, he'll talk," I finished. My newly acquired Aegis team disabled the estate's security cameras and breached the front door in under 30 seconds. It was terrifyingly efficient, a stark reminder of the illicit power Richard had wielded for decades. Now that power answered to me. Tristan and I walked into the sprawling minimalist living room. Dr. Chandler, a thin, silver-haired man in a cashmere sweater, was pinned against the marble kitchen island by two of my operatives. He was trembling violently, his eyes wide with terror. "What is this? Who are you people?" he stammered, wincing as the guard held his arms behind his back. "If you want money, the safe is in the study. Take whatever you want." I stepped out of the shadows and into the soft glow of the kitchen pendant lights. I pulled off my leather driving gloves, slowly making deliberate eye contact with him. "I don't want your money, doctor," I said softly. "I have plenty of my own." Recognition slowly dawned on his face, followed instantly by a sickening instinctual dread. He knew exactly who I was. I had sat in his office 3 years ago sobbing as he held my hand and told me my father's heart had simply given out. He had looked me in the eyes and lied, while the blood money rested in his offshore account. Ms. Blake," he choked out. "Cora, what are you doing here? My father trusted you, Aris," I said, walking closer until I was mere inches from his face. "He considered you a friend. He donated $5 million to the cardiology wing that bears your name, and you sold his life for 10% of that." I don't know what you're talking about." He panicked, shaking his head rapidly. "Your father's death was a tragedy. His heart. Save the medical jargon for someone who hasn't read the ledger." I interrupted, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Liam Kensington's burn book. I have the dates. I have the offshore routing numbers. I know about the Cyprus account. I know you altered his medication to induce massive cardiac arrest." Chandler's legs gave out, but the Aegis guards held him up. He was hyperventilating, tears spilling down his cheeks. "He forced me. Richard forced me. He said if I didn't do it, he would ruin my career, my family. He said he would have me killed. And you decided my father's life was a fair trade for your comfort," I sneered. I gestured to Tristan, who pulled out a high-definition video camera and set it on a tripod, angling the lens directly at the weeping doctor. "You have 2 choices tonight, Eris," I stated coldly, pulling a chair out from the dining table and sitting down, crossing my legs. "Choice 1. I hand the ledger and your offshore bank records over to the FBI right now. You go to federal prison for first-degree murder. They will seize your assets, your house, and your pension. Your family will be left destitute, and you will die in a cell." Chandler sobbed louder, violently shaking his head. "Please, no. No, please. Choice 2. I continued, unyielding. "You look into that camera. You confess to the murder of Robert Blake. You detail exactly how much Richard Kensington paid you, how he threatened you, and how the entire assassination was orchestrated. In exchange, My lawyers will secure you a plea deal with the district attorney. You will testify against Richard as a star witness. You will still go to prison, but it will be a minimum security facility for a fraction of the time, and your family keeps the legal portion of your estate. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his terrified gaze. But let me be very clear. If you choose option 1, I won't just ruin your life. I will use the billions of dollars at my disposal to ensure your name becomes synonymous with butchery. I will bury you so deep the sunlight will never touch your face again. He stared at me trembling. He was looking at a ghost, the daughter of the man he killed resurrected into a monster he couldn't fight. "Turn the camera on," Chandler whispered, bowing his head in total defeat. "I'll tell you everything." For the next 2 hours, I sat in agonizing silence as the man who murdered my father outlined the entire conspiracy. He detailed the encrypted phone calls with Richard, the secret meetings, the exact dosage of the contraindicated medication that caused the fatal heart attack. He confessed to it all on crystal-clear video. When it was over, I walked out into the freezing rain, climbed into the back of my SUV, and finally let the tears fall. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure acidic relief. The trap was fully loaded. It was time to pull the trigger. Sunday evening. The sky over the Kensington estate in the Hamptons was painted in a violent bruised sunset. The sprawling 10-acre property was unnervingly quiet. Richard had retreated here after being ousted from his company, licking his wounds and plotting a legal counterattack. Liam was trapped here under house arrest, wearing his ankle monitor like a badge of shame. They thought the worst was over. They thought they were just fighting a hostile corporate takeover and an embezzlement scandal. They didn't realize they were already standing on the gallows. I drove my Maybach through the wrought iron front gates. They were wide open. The private security team that normally guarded the perimeter was gone, ordered to stand down by their new owner, me. I parked directly in front of the grand oak doors of the mansion. Tristan Brooks stepped out of the passenger side carrying a heavy black briefcase. "The local police chief and the state homicide detectives are 2 miles out holding position," Tristan said, checking his watch. "You have 10 minutes before they breach the property." "That's all I need," I replied. I pushed the heavy front doors open and walked into the cavernous marble foyer. The house smelled of expensive cigars and desperation. "Who's there?" Richard's voice echoed from the grand living room down the hall. I told the staff I didn't want to be disturbed. I walked into the living room, my heels clicking sharply against the imported tile. Richard was sitting in a leather armchair by the unlit fireplace, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He looked a decade older than he had 3 days ago. Liam was slumped on the sofa across from him, looking thoroughly defeated, nursing a hangover. They both stared at me in absolute shock. "Cora!" Liam breathed out instinctively, standing up, his eyes darting to the door to see if I was alone. "How did you get past the gate?" Richard demanded, setting his glass down, his face flushing with immediate rage. "You are trespassing. Get out of my house before I call the police." "I wouldn't bother, Richard," I said smoothly, taking a seat on the velvet ottoman across from them. "The police are already on their way." Liam frowned, taking a step forward. "What are you talking about? The SEC already raided my apartment. What more could you possibly want? You ruined my life. You took the company, you took the money. You won Cora. Just leave us alone." "You think this is about the money?" I laughed, a cold, hollow sound that made both men flinch. "You think I burned your entire lives to the ground because of a few $1 million, and a pathetic affair with Chloe. I looked at Liam, truly looked at him. In my past life, this man had watched me die, a smile playing on his lips. He was weak, arrogant, and fundamentally hollow. I bought your security firm, Richard, I stated, shifting my gaze to the patriarch. And when I fired your top operatives, one of them decided to buy my favor by handing over the contents of Liam's hidden safe, specifically a leather-bound journal. The color drained from Liam's face in an instant. He staggered backward, hitting the edge of the sofa. No, she didn't. Richard whipped his head around to stare at his son. What journal? Liam, what is she talking about? The burn book. I clarified, my voice rising in volume. The meticulous little diary your genius son kept documenting every bribe, every illegal wire transfer, and every felony you ever committed, Richard. He kept it as leverage against you. You idiot! Richard roared, lunging toward Liam. You documented it. I told you to leave no paper trail. He did more than document the financial crimes, Richard. I shouted, my voice cracking like a whip, freezing the older man in his tracks. He documented the meeting on October 12th. He documented the $500,000 wire transfer to Cyprus. He documented the murder of my father. Dead silence fell over the room. The air grew thick, suffocating. Richard slowly turned back to face me. The mask of the arrogant billionaire was gone, replaced by the cornered, terrified eyes of an animal, realizing it was caught in a snare. You can't prove anything, Richard whispered, his voice trembling. A journal isn't proof. It's hearsay. Liam is a known liar and an embezzler. Any lawyer will tear that book apart in court. You're right. I agreed, a predatory smile stretching across my face. I gestured to Tristan, who opened the briefcase and pulled out a tablet. He placed it on the coffee table between us and tapped the screen. The video of Dr. Eris Chandler began to play. His terrified, weeping confession echoed through the grand living room, detailing exactly how Richard had orchestrated the assassination. Richard collapsed back into his armchair, burying his face in his hands. He knew it was over. There was no spinning this. There was no PR team that could fix a premeditated murder charge with a recorded confession from the hitman. Liam was shaking, looking between me and the tablet. Cora, please. I didn't know he was going to kill your dad. I swear to God, I just found out after the fact I loved you. I really did love you in the beginning. I stood up, walking slowly toward him. He cowered backward until his back hit the wall. You never loved me, Liam, I whispered, standing inches from his face. You loved the idea of controlling me. You loved the power. In another life, you might have even killed me for it. He stared at me, profoundly confused by the another life comment, but terrified nonetheless. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Save your apologies for the warden, I replied. The wail of police sirens pierced the quiet evening air. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the living room, casting long, frantic shadows across the walls. Heavy footsteps pounded against the marble foyer as a dozen armed state troopers and homicide detectives stormed into the house. Richard Kensington, Liam Kensington hands, where we can see them. The lead detective barked, his weapon drawn. I stepped back, crossing my arms, as the officers aggressively secured both men, slamming them face first onto the expensive Persian rug to cuff them. As they hauled Liam to his feet, his hands bound behind his back, he looked over his shoulder at me. His eyes were wide with shocked betrayal and a deep fundamental terror. He finally realized that the naive, sheltered heiress he thought he had played was an illusion. "Who are you?" Liam whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm the consequence," I answered simply. I watched as the police dragged the two broken men out of their own home and shoved them into the back of the waiting squad cars. The red and blue lights faded down the driveway, leaving the estate in total absolute silence. Tristan stood beside me, closing the briefcase. "It's done, boss." "Yes," I breathed, looking up at the ceiling of the grand mansion. The phantom pain in my spine was finally gone. The heavy, suffocating weight of my past life had evaporated. I hadn't just survived my second chance, I had conquered it. I was Cora Blake. I was the CEO of an empire, a woman forged in the fires of absolute betrayal, and I was never, ever going to be a victim again. I watched the taillights of the police cruisers disappear into the dark, taking the architects of my misery straight to a concrete cell. The Kensington Empire was ash, and from it the Blake legacy was reborn, untouchable, and utterly ruthless. They thought they were burying a naive girl, but all they did was dig their own graves. Chloe is penniless. Liam is facing decades in federal prison, and Richard will die behind bars knowing I own everything he built. The board is mine. The city is mine. My father's ghost can finally rest, and my second life has only just begun. If you loved watching this ultimate revenge unfold, hit that like button right now. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder to never let anyone walk all over them. Subscribe to the channel for more insane real-life drama, and let me know in the comments, what was your favorite part of the Kensington takedown?